We're now going to do the third and the final question. The question is, was Twitter right to ban Donald Trump? Let's look at where you stand on this question. Charles, can you go first?
You said Charles?
Yeah, I'm not going from the ends. Just for radio, can you announce?
Yes.
Stuart?
Knew it. No.
And Nina?
Yes.
And Michael?
Yes.
So we have 3 S's and 1 no. Oh, Stuart, you get that little extra time again.
Yeah, somebody will do it. Some people will do anything for a little extra speaking time.
All right, we're going to ask Charles to go first on the question, was Twitter right to ban Donald Trump? You've got 90 seconds, Charles.
Thank you. So obviously I support the First Amendment. I do not think, let me caveat this, I do not think politicians should be removed from social media platforms unless they incite violence, unless they incite harm. And I am of the opinion that former President Donald Trump did just that, more especially with his tweet on December 19th. That's where I am.
Thank you. And next would be, well, let's go to you, Stuart. You're the no.
Okay, so I think look, he's the first Republican candidate for president in 40 years that I haven't voted for twice now, and I sort of hope I don't have a third opportunity. But when you say he can't speak, you're not just disrespecting him and showing contempt for him. You're showing contempt for the people who voted for him, who believe what he says, and who want to hear from him. And that's a serious, serious thing to do. And before we decide we're just going to take him out, then take somebody who has that kind of responsibility out of the public square, you better have a good reason. And, you know, Twitter's reason was he's inciting violence. That was on January 8th that they said that. That wasn't January 6th. Whatever he had incited, and you know, the causation chain is what it is, was over. And what they said was, we think he's inciting future violence. He's glorifying future violence. And the case for that, well, you know, where is that violence that he incited? Is really weak. And so the idea that we took him off because he was inciting violence and then realized that he wasn't actually doing something that directly incited violence, I think discredits the decision.
Michael, you're a yes.
Yeah, so again, this is a decision of the platform. It would be a different answer, perhaps, if we said the government required him to be taken off. I would also observe he then started his own platform. I don't know how successful it is, but he wasn't deprived of his ability to speak. But the bottom line is incitement to violence, as you know, Oliver Wendell Holmes said, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. This takedown occurred a few days after January 6th, which I have to say, based on the public evidence, looks an awful lot like an insurrection, which he fueled with his statements. Now, did he spell out, oh, I want you to go kill Mike Pence, or, oh, I want to overthrow the U.S. government? No. But let me tell you, I mean, he grew up in the milieu of New York, the construction industry, when it was dominated by the mob. And I investigated and prosecuted the mob on the stuff that he was involved in. And you know what mobsters do when they want someone killed? They don't go kill so-and-so. They go, this guy's a problem. And then the guy winds up dead with his cement shoes in the East River. So what Trump was doing was saying things that the people at Twitter legitimately had a concern about, whether they were mind readers or not, legitimately had a concern about, was fueling another round of violence. And when Trump said in one of the tweets, I'm not going to the inauguration, they were concerned that was being read as there ain't going to be an inauguration because there's going to be round 2 of this. We were dealing with a very fraught situation. Again, I'm not saying the government had the power to do this, but what I am saying is it's reasonable for Twitter to say, this is too close to incitement.
Yeah, and the question is about whether Twitter was right to do it as opposed to the government's role. But Stuart, I'm going to let you do the 3 against 1 jump back into the conversation.
Yeah, so you're right, that's what he said. This is the 2 tweets that Twitter objected to and said they were glorifying violence. I'll read them out. The 75 million great American patriots who voted for me will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. And then To all those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. So he was protesting clearly the inauguration. Now, Twitter says that's a glorification of violence. If you've been a Court of Appeals judge, if a district court wrote an opinion saying that's a glorification of violence and I'm enjoining speech because of the glorification, how long would it take you on appeal to reverse that decision?
You're absolutely right, but here's again, I keep coming down to this difference. For the government to do it is a different standard than for me as an individual to say, this is my platform, my free speech rights are, I don't want to be in any way, shape, or form being seen as endorsing or promoting violence. Those are two dramatically different standards.
Okay, I want
That's
to
what they
call a
said.
timeout because Nina did not get her 90 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would agree with what Charles and Secretary Chertoff have said. I would also say that, you know, we have these different standards for politicians, right? Because it is in the public interest to hear what they're saying. I actually think that politicians should be held to a higher standard of speech because of the platforms that they have. And yes, Donald Trump got his poor little Twitter account shut down, but he still was the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world from January 8th to January 20th, and had plenty of you know, a stage, an audience to hear him speak. I think even if this had happened earlier, that there would have been plenty of room and kind of oxygen and amplification of the words that he said. He could, you know, call cameras to the Oval Office at any time. When you are inciting to violence, and maybe not in those two tweets, Stuart, but certainly we could look back earlier, before January 26th, as you said, Charles, in December, as well as during the summer of 2020, during the George Floyd protests and the president's response to that, that polarized us, that led extremists to frankly, commit violent acts not only in the Capitol, but in several other instances before that. So again, I believe that politicians should be held to a higher standard than the rest of us, and that those terms of service should be applied equally to everybody.
Charles, you and your fellow yes votes are making the argument primarily that his behavior on Twitter was an incitement to violence, and that justifies Twitter's decision to take him off. And while Stuart has some pushback on that, he also made a second argument that none of you have responded to, which is it's an insult to the people who voted to them. It's a slight to the people who voted for Donald Trump to have him removed. I'm curious what your take is on that argument.
So my take is this, that the individual whom you voted for and wanted to be president of the United States did a disservice to the country. Let me spell that out for you. Nina mentions a higher standard. You know, when a politician uses a platform that can reach millions, if not billions, of individuals and says that the election is fraudulent, that the results should not be trusted, how do you think, and assuming that the former President Trump has a level of sophistication about himself, how do you not think that those remarks aren't going to galvanize individuals into thinking that democracy is now in question, that democracy is being challenged? And then in the same said tweet, because it was one long rant, in that same tweet, he says, come to DC, it's going to be wild. And if I'm one of his supporters, you know, to Secretary Chertoff's point, I'm taking that as, you know, a call to action. And that's exactly what happened. And the January 6th Select Committee methodically spells this out. There's testimony and depositions from individuals who said that they were directly galvanized to come to DC to storm the Capitol because President Trump told them to do so.
So
you can't ignore that.
So yeah, so while Stuart is saying it's an insult to his followers, you're saying the fact that his followers would believe and trust him is the issue. But I want to take to Michael also Stuart's point that taking Twitter's decision to take Trump offline was a slight to the people who voted.
I don't agree with that. You're not taking the followers offline. You're not even taking them off if they retweet something. But if someone, for example, decides they want to tweet pictures of child pornography, among other things, the fact that people follow that individual doesn't mean that if you take him down for violating the law that you're insulting the followers. The followers are totally free to follow Trump on whatever he has, Truth Social, or whatever he's got. They're not flocking there, but that's their decision. They're not being disqualified because they followed him. So I think this is an appropriate response. And I think, as Charles pointed out, it comes against the context of a lot of dog whistles. Like it's going to be wild, like those right-wing people who ran over that woman in Charlottesville are good people. I mean, when you look in context, the people who run Twitter have to say, do we really want to continue to let someone propagate calls to action that involve violence and overthrowing the U.S. government? Followers are free to follow him elsewhere, but the speaker isn't free.
So Stuart, you have not been persuasive with your opponents on that particular point, so I want to know where you are on that in terms of their responses to it, and how strongly you want to defend that point.
So it's true that his followers can continue to speak, but they wanted to listen. They wanted to hear what he had to say, and this is a rebuke to their views. It is saying your views are not even acceptable in, decent company. And I think that if you're going to say that, you better be sure. And we talked about the responsibility of the president, and he was not responsible. But everybody up here agreed that Twitter had a responsibility and that they should explain themselves, that we need more visibility into their decision processes. They gave us visibility. They said, our determination is that those 2 tweets, the one about how his followers won't be disrespected and he's not showing up for the inauguration, that they are likely to inspire others to replicate the events of January 6th, and that there are multiple indicators they're being received and understood as encouragement to do so. And yet, in fact, there has not been any such.
The absence of evidence doesn't mean that it would have
They said, we're worried they're going to show up on Inauguration Day and cause a problem. Nobody did.
Well, it's great that the U.S. government arrested a bunch of people.
Yeah.
This is their implausible excuse to ban him. And then what are we going to do? Is he being punished with a timeout? Or is this something where we still think he is about to incite violence? He hasn't.
So you just said, I think you implied they were looking for an excuse to ban him.
Yeah, of course they were.
Why didn't they earlier?
Precisely for the reason we talked about. There are very good reasons for somebody who has that kind of following to leave them up. Frankly, I'm not even sure it's good for him to be on Twitter. It gives us an insight into his mind that's, not the most appetizing thing. And we all should, we understand him and Elon Musk better than anybody else of similar problems. And I think Twitter has done us a public service by letting these folks air themselves, and that's one of the reasons why they left him up. I think they should have done it, and now they're stuck. They don't know when are they going to let him back in.
So I just want to ask the panel in general, whoever wants to jump in on this, I think Stuart is implying that while Twitter said he was banned for these 2 tweets, he was banned for 4 years of tweets, and it broke the camel's back. Does anybody feel that that's actually what happened? And is it somehow disingenuous for Twitter to cite these 2 tweets as the reason?
I can't read the mind of the people in Twitter, but it seems to me it's hard to evaluate this without recognizing a big thing happened on January 6th. Mm-hmm. And that made both his prior statements look much more problematic, and meant that anything subsequent against that background was problematic. Now, again, I want to keep going back to my point. I'm not saying the government should have banned it, but certainly as a platform owner or as an editor, in the analogy I'm using, an editor could say, this person wants to use my newspaper, my television show, to inspire violence and shout fire in a crowded theater, and I don't want him to do it. And I think that's appropriate, and whether they're mind readers or not, it certainly seems to me reasonable.
Charles, go ahead.
To the Secretary's point, I'm not in the mind of Twitter executives. Was it a culmination of tweets? Probably, possibly, right? But one can't ignore the fact that the leader of the Oath Keepers in Florida responded to that tweet and said, yes, sir, I will go down to D.C. and stand with you and take our government back that was stolen from us, and then communicate in secure channels that really weren't too secure with leaders of the Proud Boys to organize and do the same.
Nina, what do you think is the impact of Trump having been banned from Twitter?
Well, with deplatforming not only of Trump, but of QAnon conspiracists, of Alex Jones, et cetera, we do see a downturn in the amount of harmful rhetoric online. Deplatforming does work. It is a decision that should not be taken lightly, just like I would say the decision to raid Mar-a-Lago for secret documents was not taken lightly. You don't take these decisions lightly when they have to do with influential individuals, but when they break the law, in the case of the documents, when they break the terms of service and are likely to be inciting violence, as in the case of Twitter, I think that that's important. And I would say to Stuart, we haven't had another January 6th, but there have been plenty of little tiny violent events that have been incited by the Trump network and by, frankly, Trump's Truth Social posts that he continues to put out there. Look at the man who showed up after the Mar-a-Lago raid to the FBI field office in Ohio and tried to shoot out the FBI. I mean, these events keep occurring, and I think we're lucky that the former president, doesn't have a
If
large
you banned
platform.
everybody who has a nut who listened to them and then went to shoot them.
Unfortunately,
There's a
Stuart,
whole
there are
bunch
a
of-
lot of nuts.
Yeah, exactly, and they're going to attach themselves to whatever allows them to work out their demons in a violent way. I just don't. I think we probably would be more bored and less intrigued by Trump if we had left him up than if we took him down. We will never know. Twitter made a bad choice, in my view. But the fact that he is off Twitter gives him a talking point that is plausible, that he was shut down by people who just don't share his values or the values of the people who voted for him. And we would be better off letting him display those values to everybody.